There's something about this game. I can't quite put my finger on it, but for some reason it reminds me of The Witcher?
Battling frog scum was hungry work. If he could find more ingredients, the chef might make him a feast fit for a king.
Oh, that's it. Yeah, the shields are really similar. Hey guys, it's Cody with Indie Game Pulse. If you like indie game reviews and countdowns and want to see more, click the like button and subscribe. Both things help our channel grow and also help our videos get shared to other indie game fans like you, so thank you. I've got to be honest, guys, Tales of Iron has captivated me, not only with its wonderful progressive world building, but the story, the music, the combat, everything. It's just so well implemented and polished. In fact, as soon as I started thinking, man, I wish the combat was a little more difficult, I started getting my butt handed to me by some of the side mission bosses. Let's get right into it. Reggie the Rat, or as he was surely called in grade school, Wedgie, is maybe not the most predictable heir to his old father's throne, given Reggie's diminutive stature compared to his older brothers Bam Bam and Rem Rem, but when tragedy strikes the Crimson Keep, Reggie must not only establish his claim to the throne, but work on rebuilding the kingdom too in order to take down the menacing frogs. As you venture far and wide, gathering resources and gold to rebuild, you'll meet friendly faces abroad in places like Longtail Village and the Ranger's Lodge, and those places are only the tip of the iceberg, as they say, since there is much more to be discovered below the surface. As you venture and gather resources, you'll come home every once in a while to advance the main story and essentially level up by eating delicious meals prepared by Rem Rem or building new weapons and armor with Bam Bam the Blacksmith. A lot of different equipment can be found throughout the world, especially through side quests too, which can be picked up from the local inns and bulletin boards or just discovered as you run around the towns. The handy map makes it very easy to find exactly where you need to go without telling you how to get there. Probably my favorite feature of the game is how the story is told through the rats you meet. When I first heard the dialogue, I thought I was listening to a crappy flute cover on YouTube, but the sounds designed around the rats' dialogue mimic the squeaks and squeals of a rodent in an endearing way without being annoying. All the while, small animations and drawn pictures are used to convey what the rat is saying. It's a beautiful addition, like an instrumental voiceover, and each character even seems to have his own tone. Now, Tales of Iron is described as an epic RPG adventure with brutal Souls-like combat, so let's take a closer look at those claims and see how the game measures up. Is it epic? You bet. It's not often these days that a game can elicit a reaction from me, but without spoiling anything, I audibly gasped pretty early on and was buckled in for the rest of the ride. Reggie seems like such an underdog because he's so small, but he is backed by his brothers and some great friends along his journey to reclaim the Rat Kingdom from the frogs. I really like the RPG elements and customizable combat, where you can trade out different styles of weapons like swords, hammers, and spears, depending on how you want to play. The weapons don't necessarily have stats shown aside from their damage and weight, but they do handle differently, and you have quick attacks and charged attacks at your disposal too. I tried to keep Reggie as light as possible and focused on one-handed combat, but you also carry a two-handed weapon, a bow later on, a shield, and wear a helmet and armor. All of these have weight attributed to them, and the heavier Reggie is, the more sluggishly he moves and dodges. When you're in an intense fight with a frog warrior or a giant Mozzie, you'll have to figure out which strategy is best for that situation, and you may need to change some equipment out before going back in for more. Most of your armor pieces even have resistances to certain enemies so that they deal less damage to you. This is a good time to mention the manual save locations, which are spread abundantly throughout the kingdom and are just simple benches like we've seen in games like Hollow Knight. Take advantage of these when you're on the way to a boss fight, or you might regret it when you're walking 3 to 4 minutes back the next time. Now let's talk about the Souls-like combat, because this is where my only very minor complaint comes in. The combat feels Souls-like, with its strong dependence on dodges, rolls, and parries to defeat even some of the smallest enemies early on. Everyone has their attack patterns that need to be learned, and when you go against a boss for the first time, you'll likely be hard-pressed to recognize his moves early enough to react and win the fight. But in addition to the physical tells that a certain attack is coming, the developers have also included color-coded symbols to warn you too. It's not often I ask for more difficulty, or more frustration in my case, but in Tales of Iron, sometimes the color-coded symbols just made me too reliant on them, and took my attention away from the enemy and his tendencies that gave his attacks away. I'll say that I think this is one of the most accessible Souls-like games out there, and perhaps that's what the developers intended, but I would have preferred a difficulty option or a menu toggle to turn these extra warnings off. Aside from that, the combat feels just right, with your quick attacks poking and prodding, and your charged attacks causing you to leap forward and deliver a crushing blow, but leaving you vulnerable too for a split second. The balance of attacking and defending is so well done, and there were times when I would finish a boss fight with just a sliver of health left, and my hands almost shaking from the excitement. This is probably a good time to mention too that you can restore some health during adventuring and fighting by drinking your bug juice. No, not those nasty little drinks we all pretended to like as kids. Actual juice from actual bugs, which you can harvest for yourself or replenish at a bug juice cooler. So the gameplay and mechanics, in my opinion, are just about as perfect as they can be. Difficult and challenging, with a noticeable increase about halfway through the game, but not hampered by bad controls or laggy inputs. It feels so polished and rewarding to beat these mammoth frogs into the ground. As I mentioned earlier, the world and the way in which it is built and established through the story is hands down one of my favorites that I've seen this year, and maybe ever. From the start at the Crimson Keep, you see it prospering in all its glory and its abrupt downfall as it's destroyed by the Frog Clan, and then over time, you see the hard work of Reggie and his brothers coming to fruition in the foreground and background as beauty is slowly restored. And this happens time and time again within each location and even the individual map pieces as you complete more missions and defeat more frogs. In Longtail Village, you can see the city square being rebuilt. You can find a farmer milking these miniature silt striders or giant fleas, and in all the areas you can see musicians contributing to the glorious fantasy soundtrack, which I'll talk about in just a minute. The art style is truly a spectacle too. I don't know if it's hand-drawn, but it certainly looks and feels that way, especially in the environments. Every aspect features dark outlines and borders with muted colors filling in the gaps, akin to something you might see in a dark fairy tale. It's a melodious mixture of fantasy and medieval styles that plays out wonderfully. The kind of misshapen forms and buildings throughout the world too actually remind me of the game Creaks. In Tales of Iron, there are some fast travel options between the map boards in each locale, but with most areas being connected and each only taking a couple minutes to walk through, especially later in the game, I found myself just wandering around enjoying the sights while I walked. You should also keep your eye open for warnings of upcoming enemies, which often begin trailing you in the background and keeping a close eye on you before you encounter them. It's a little daunting to see this giant Mozzie hovering in the background as you slay their children in front of them, as you know they're going to be super pissed when you find them. If you like fantasy soundtracks filled with strings, woodwinds, and some light percussion, you're in for a treat. Evolving as you explore and discover more of the map, this score has some pretty memorable tunes, and even as you walk around the map and the music fades out from where you just left, as you near the next part of the map, you might begin to hear some audio cues as to what area you'll go through next. The soundtrack and sound design are so well done, even including just the right amount of ambient and natural noises when the music dies out. And when I mentioned earlier that you can see the rats performing some of the music when you explore, it doesn't stop there. Even in some of the combat sequences, you can see animals in the background performing in an effort to spur on their champion. It's fantastic how well the art, world, and story have been melded together. So the question is, should you play Tales of Iron? I give it the highest recommendation. I think the art is amazing, and the world building, again, is possibly the best I've seen this year, with the way it infuses the soundtrack and story and continues to develop as the story goes on. The gameplay is just right and well polished, giving you a bit of frustration as a Souls-like game should, but also giving plenty of customization so you can take things into your own hands. Tales of Iron is fresh and funny, and even if you don't like rats, you may reconsider your opinion by the end. If you like what you see here at Indie Game Pulse, join us on Discord and consider helping us grow by supporting us via Patreon or YouTube channel memberships. Links are below. Thank you very much to my 1,570 subscribers for your support. For more top indie game countdowns and reviews, check out the videos on your screen now, and I'll see you on the other side.